Get out of my garage! I shouted through the car window, my fist pounding the glass so hard it rattled. Victoria Hayes jolted awake, eyes wide with shock, mascara smeared across her cheek. She'd been sleeping in my garage engine, running air conditioner, blasting like she owned the damn place. You can't talk to me like that, she shrieked back, voice muffled but defiant. I'm the HOA president! I don't care if you're the Queen of England, I roared. This is my property. You drove into my garage and fell asleep like it's a hotel. Her face flushed red. I was exhausted. I needed a moment. You don't understand the pressure. Pressure? I slammed my palm against the hood. You've been harassing this entire neighborhood for 2 years, finding people for chalk on driveways, and now you're sleeping in my garage? That's when I smiled, cold, deliberate, because the HOA president had no idea what was about to walk through that interior door. 2 very large, very protective Rottweilers who didn't care about her title. And neither did her severe dog allergy. I didn't always think of my garage as a battlefield. For a long time, it was just my favorite part of the house. I'm a middle-aged guy. Pretty simple. Give me a sturdy workbench, a decent set of tools, a crackling old radio, and a fridge with a few cold drinks. And I'm happy. The garage was where I went when the world felt too loud. No HOA emails. No passive-aggressive flyers. No urgent community updates. Just me, a half-finished project, and the hum of a box fan in the corner. Then Victoria became president of the HOA. It wasn't some grand election. It was one of those sad little meetings where 5 people show up, 3 vote, and suddenly one person has power over everyone's lawn height and Christmas lights. From that day on, it was like someone handed a hall monitor a badge. Victoria didn't just take the role seriously. She treated it like a mission. She patrolled the street like she owned it, clipboard in hand, visor on, lips pursed, eyes scanning for violations, trash cans an inch too close to the curb, garden hoses not coiled neatly enough, a lawn chair left out overnight. We joked that if your grass grew a millimeter too tall, you'd get a violation notice with a photo attached. The joke stopped when the letters started arriving. It wasn't just me. The Johnsons across the street got written up because their kids drew chalk on the driveway. The couple on the corner got a warning because their wreath was seasonally inappropriate. An older guy down the road was threatened with a fine because he had a restored truck in his driveway that Victoria decided looked too industrial. She loved the rules, but she loved the power even more. Now, I'm not anti-rule. I mow my lawn. I edge the sidewalk. I keep my trash in bins with lids. I don't leave broken appliances on the porch or blast music at 2 in the morning. I'm the guy who pays his dues on time and minds his own business. But with Victoria, it didn't matter how reasonable you were. What mattered was that she could tell you what to do, push back even a little, and she'd magically find a new rule you'd never heard of. The first time she really got under my skin was a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the garage changing the oil on my car when I heard a sharp knock on the side door. I wiped my hands, opened it, and there she was. Visor, clipboard, tight little smile. "Hi," she said, using that fake sweet tone people put on right before they complain. "Just a friendly reminder that you can't leave your garage door open for extended periods. It attracts crime." I looked past her at my own driveway, then back at her. "I'm standing in it," I said. "Working?" "Yes," she replied, "and it's been open for about 40 minutes. She actually checked her watch." I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. It never came. She pointed to a line in the HOA handbook: garage doors should remain closed when not actively in use. I waved a hand at the oil pan, the jack, the tools all over the floor. I am actively using it. She gave me that thin-lipped look like she'd just bitten into something sour. "Just be mindful," she said, then turned and walked off, scribbling on her clipboard. From there, it escalated. One week, I got a notice because my trash can lid wasn't fully secured. Another time, it was because my porch light bulb was too bright and not warm-toned. My personal favorite was the warning that my truck was parked too close to the edge of the driveway, which, as far as I could tell, meant she didn't like where I'd put it. What really got to me though, was her habit of treating other people's driveways like her own personal parking lot. It started small. When she hosted HOA meetings, her car would creep a little into my driveway. Later, when street parking got tight, she'd swing her sedan halfway across the bottom of my drive just for a minute while she dropped something off. Those minutes always seemed to happen exactly when I needed to leave. I tried being civil. The first time, I walked over and said, "Hey, Victoria, could you not block my driveway? I've got to get to work." She smiled, all fake neighborly charm. "Oh, of course. I was just dropping off some forms. You should have told me you were leaving." "On my own property." "Sure." The second time, I said it more firmly. "Victoria, this is my driveway. You can't park here." She sighed like I was the one being unreasonable. "We're all neighbors. It's just space. We should share." Funny how sharing always meant I got blocked in and she got a free parking spot. Over time, she pushed farther like a kid testing a boundary. First, the bumper crossed the edge of my property, then half the car. Then, one particularly bad afternoon when there were no street spaces left, I came home to find her sedan parked sideways across the front of my driveway like a barricade. That day, I didn't ask nicely. I rang her doorbell. She opened it with her phone to her ear, clearly mid-conversation. "Yes?" she said coolly. "You're in my driveway," I said, keeping my voice as calm as I could. "I need you to move. Now." She tilted her head. "I'll be out in a few minutes. I'm on a call." "I'm on a schedule," I replied. "Move the car now, or I'll have it towed." Her eyes narrowed. "You can't tow my car. I'm HOA president. We control the towing contract." That sentence lodged in my brain like a splinter. She really believed the rules bent around her. I didn't tow her car. I walked away. Before I said something I couldn't take back. But after that, I noticed every little encroachment. Every time she parked too close. Every time she swung her door open like my driveway was overflow parking for the HOA queen. The garage became even more important after that. It was the last line, the one place she hadn't invaded. I kept it organized, clean, private. I even installed a small security camera above the interior door. Not because I expected trouble, but because my tools weren't cheap, and I liked knowing if anyone messed with them. For a while, things calmed down. She still did her patrols, still mailed out her little violation letters, still wielded the HOA handbook like a weapon, but she stopped blocking my driveway as often. Maybe someone else had climbed to the top of her hit list. Maybe she'd found a new project. I didn't care, as long as my garage stayed mine. I'll never forget the evening everything changed because it began so normally. I had just finished a long shift. One of those days where every hour feels like 3. All I wanted was to pull into my garage, close the door behind me, crack open a cold drink, and sit on my little rolling stool while pretending to check on a project I had no energy to touch. The simple rituals of a tired man. That was the plan. I pressed the remote as I turned onto my street, already feeling the relief of home washing over me. The garage door began to rise in that slow, familiar way. And then my foot slammed the brake pedal to the floor. There was a car in my garage, not near it, not blocking it, not barely inside by mistake. No. Victoria's gold-colored sedan was parked dead center in the middle of my garage like she'd pulled in, set the parking brake, and settled into a premium reserved spot paid for with HOA arrogance. I stared into the space as the garage door finished lifting. For a full 3 seconds, my brain refused to process what my eyes were seeing. It wasn't just that her car didn't belong there. It was that she had crossed the final line, the only untouched boundary left on my property. I got out of my truck slowly, as if any sudden movement might make the whole thing even more surreal. I walked toward the garage, half expecting her to jump out and claim some bizarre HOA emergency that required her to commandeer my garage like she was part of a government agency. But as I got closer, I didn't see movement. I saw something far stranger. Victoria was inside the car, head tilted back, mouth slightly open, hands folded across her stomach, eyes closed. She was asleep. Asleep in my garage, like it was a hotel nap station. For the first time in my life, I actually checked around for hidden cameras. This had to be a prank. A social experiment. A lawsuit trap. A new HOA rule being filmed for some kind of dramatic demonstration. Something. Anything. But no one was around. The cul-de-sac was quiet, porch lights glowing softly. A sprinkler sputtered 2 houses down. The air smelled faintly of jasmine and engine fumes. I stepped up beside the driver's window. The engine was running. The air conditioner hummed. Victoria was curled slightly to one side, visor still on her head. It was like she had driven straight into my garage, shut the door, leaned back, and passed out mid-power trip. I knocked on the window. Not hard, just enough to wake any functioning human. Nothing. I knocked again, this time louder. Still nothing. Then I knocked a third time, the kind of knock you use on teenagers who've slept through their alarms. Victoria didn't so much as twitch. She was outdrained every ounce of consciousness from her. I stepped back and stared at her in disbelief. For a moment, some tiny part of me wondered if she was okay. But the soft rise and fall of her chest told me she was fine, just sleeping incredibly deeply in the one place she absolutely unquestionably should not be. And that's when the irritation hit me. Because this wasn't an accident. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't, oh, I thought this was the guest parking area. This was entitlement in its purest form. Victoria genuinely believed the HOA rules bent around her, that other people's property lines were optional, that personal boundaries were cute suggestions, not actual limits. I circled to the front of the car. She had pulled in perfectly straight. She'd taken her time. She'd stopped just short of my tool chest, leaving enough room for someone to walk between the bumper and the workbench. She didn't just park here. She settled in. And the more I thought about it, the more it felt like the culmination of every stupid little HOA power move she'd pulled over the past year. All the warnings, all the condescending lectures, all the smug, I'm just enforcing the rules speeches. This was the moment where the universe said, all right, buddy, today's the day you push back. I looked at her sleeping in that car, blissfully unaware of the storm she'd created, and a calm washed over me. A clarity I hadn't felt in months. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to knock until she woke up. I wasn't going to call the police or the towing company. No, I was going to fix this the way a man fixes a boundary problem. First, I hit the garage door button and let it close. The motor whirred. The panel slid down, and the outside world disappeared with a soft thump. Now it was just me, Victoria, and the soft rumble of her car engine filling the quiet space. Second, I checked the interior door leading into my house. Locked. Good. That mattered for what would come next. I stood in the middle of the garage, with my arms crossed, thinking. The longer I watched her sleep, the more ridiculous the whole situation became. Victoria, the self-appointed sheriff of the neighborhood, sleeping in the one place she had absolutely no business being. She looked peaceful, even serene, like she had conquered my property and now rested triumphantly after the victory. I stepped closer and said through the window, Victoria, nothing. Victoria, I repeated louder. Her eyelid twitched, but she didn't wake. I could have opened the car door, but something in me knew that whatever reaction she gave would be defensive, dramatic, and full of excuses. She'd twist the story before I even had a chance to speak. She'd claim authority, claim misunderstanding, claim she had every right to be here because of some imaginary HOA subclause she invented 5 minutes earlier. So instead of confronting her right then, I decided to teach her. And that's when the plan came to me. Clean, simple, poetic. Victoria had parked in my garage. Fine. She would experience my garage every inch of it, including its residents. I smiled to myself and walked into the house. I whistled once, sharp, short, familiar. 2 sets of heavy paws thumped across the tile. Max trotted up first, the serious older one, with a chest like a brick wall. Diesel followed with that enthusiastic wiggle he had, a dog who looked like a linebacker with the soul of a toddler. They sat in front of me, heads tilted, waiting for the cue. Boys, I said softly, we've got a situation. Their ears perked. There's someone in the garage who doesn't belong. Max let out a low rumbling sound, not a growl, more like a question. Who? Victoria, I said. Both dogs reacted exactly the way you'd expect from two Rottweilers who had, on multiple occasions, watched me rant about HOA violations. Diesel wagged harder. Max's posture shifted into full guard mode. Let's go say hello. I opened the interior garage door. Their noses lifted immediately, catching the scent of a stranger. Max padded forward first, eyes locked on the object inside the car. Diesel followed, nails tapping across the concrete in eager little clicks. The sight of those two massive shadows approaching the car was beautiful. They stood directly in front of the driver's window, staring at Victoria with the patient intensity of creatures who fully understood personal boundaries and deeply mistrusted those who ignored them. Victoria slept on. I folded my arms, leaned against the workbench, and waited. Because sooner or later, she was going to wake up. And when she did, the two surprises were going to redefine the word regret. Max was the first one to notice when Victoria finally stirred. He didn't bark. He didn't growl. He just stood there, this 120-pound wall of muscle and discipline, staring through the glass like a bouncer waiting for a drunk customer to realize they were in the wrong club. Diesel, meanwhile, was pacing excitedly beside him, tail wagging so hard his whole back end swayed with it. To him, everything was a fun surprise. To Victoria, well, she was about to have a very different experience. Her eyelids fluttered, her head shifted slightly, then her visor slipped sideways, landing crooked across her forehead. She wrinkled her nose, stretched once, and blinked herself halfway awake. Her eyes opened fully. They met Max's eyes first. It was like watching someone flip from sleepy to terrified in a single frame. Her mouth fell open. Her whole body jerked upward. She gasped so sharply I could hear it through the glass. And then, right on cue, she let out a scream worthy of a low-budget horror movie. Max didn't move. Diesel froze, confused. I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing. Victoria scrambled backward, slamming her shoulder against the door. Then she twisted and tried to climb into the back seat, but her foot got tangled in her purse strap, and she half fell, half flopped over the center console. It looked like someone had tossed a mannequin into a dryer, all limbs in panic. Inside her sealed little bubble, she shouted something I couldn't hear clearly. Something like, "Get away," or "Help," or possibly "Dog demon." Based on the expression, it could have been any of the three. She fumbled for the door handle. Locked. She hit the lock switch. Still locked. She looked up at the garage door closed. Then she looked at the interior door leading into the house, also closed. She was trapped, and she knew it. Her next scream was louder, higher pitched, and broke halfway through like a ninth grader at choir practice. Diesel barked once, not aggressively, just startled by her volume, and that sent her into another spiral of flailing limbs and muffled shrieks. I stepped forward, leaning my elbows casually on the hood of her car, watching her through the windshield like I was enjoying a matinee performance. "Victoria," I said calmly through the glass. "Good morning." She mouthed something along the lines of, "Let me out," punctuated by frantic pointing gestures toward the garage door. "Now, I want to make something clear," I continued. "I wasn't trying to terrorize her. My dogs weren't dangerous, not unless someone threatened me directly. But Victoria didn't know that. And frankly, given everything she'd put the neighborhood through, a little respectful fear of boundaries seemed overdue." "Relax," I said, still calmly. "They're friendly. Mostly." Her eyes bulged. Diesel stepped forward and put his paws on the door, peering in excitedly. Victoria shrieked again so loudly he backed up in confusion. That's when I noticed something strange. Her breathing was weird, shallow, quick, her chest rising and falling too fast. At first, I thought it was pure panic, but then she sneezed. Loudly, violently. The kind of sneeze that looks like it shakes a person's soul loose. She froze afterward, eyes widening again. She sniffed once, then sneezed again harder. "Oh no," I murmured. And then came sneeze number 3, which was accompanied by her eyes watering, her nose reddening, and her voice croaking something unintelligible. Victoria wasn't just scared. She was allergic to dogs. spectacularly, explosively allergic. She sneezed a fourth time so forcefully that her visor flew off completely. Then a fifth. Then a sixth. Diesel tilted his head, concerned. Max just sat down, stoic as ever, like a soldier watching his commander unravel. "Oh boy," I muttered. For a brief moment, I wondered if this was still a prank, or if it had escalated into something more serious. Allergies can be tricky. I didn't want her having a medical emergency in my garage. That was the kind of HOA nightmare no one wanted. But then Victoria spoke. Between sneezes, she managed to shout, "Why achoo are there achoo dogs in here?" I raised an eyebrow. "Victoria, why are you in my garage?" She tried to respond, but another sneeze tore out of her with hurricane force. "I achoo! Can't achoo! Breathe!" I doubted that. She was yelling quite loudly for someone unable to breathe. Still, I softened a little. Just a little. But not enough to let her out immediately. Because here's the thing. This wasn't about punishing a woman with allergies. This was about consequences, something Victoria had avoided her entire HOA presidency. She'd lectured elderly neighbors until they cried. She'd fined single parents for leaving bikes out for 10 minutes. She'd threatened people with legal action over bird feeders. This wasn't revenge. This was balance. And she wasn't actually in danger, just miserable. There's a difference. She sneezed again, clutching her steering wheel like it was a life preserver. "Please, achoo. Open achoo the door." I sighed dramatically. "Victoria, I would have opened it sooner. But see, you're trespassing. And as HOA president, you know how serious that is." She whimpered something that sounded like, "I'm sorry," but it was buried under another sneeze. Max took a step closer to the car again, sniffing at the door. Victoria screamed and sneezed simultaneously, a sound I hope I never hear again. Her makeup was running. Her eyes were swollen. Her face was red. She looked like someone who had just lost a fight with a pollen-filled tornado. That's when Diesel, sweet, curious, Diesel pressed his nose against the window. She shrieked so high-pitched that even Max blinked in surprise. "Okay," I finally said, raising my hands. "Okay. Lesson learned, right?" She nodded frantically between sneezes. "And you're never parking in my garage again?" More frantic nodding, more sneezing. "And you're going to respect everyone's property lines from now on?" She nodded so hard her hair shook loose from its bun. "All right then." I walked toward the garage control panel. Victoria tracked my movement with desperate eyes. I clicked the button. The garage door groaned and began rising. Fresh air rushed in. Light flooded the space. Victoria sneezed once more, then immediately fumbled with her keys and started the process of backing out. Except she was shaking so badly, it took her 3 tries to shift into reverse. When she finally pulled out into the driveway, she braked halfway into the street and put the car in park again. She lowered the window just enough to yell, "I'm achoo, sorry," before sneezing again and speeding away without waiting for a reply. Max looked up at me. Diesel wagged happily. "Good work, boys," I said, scratching their heads. The garage felt peaceful again. Quiet. Mine. And for the first time in months, I felt like the neighborhood bully had finally met a boundary she couldn't cross or sneeze her way through. Victoria didn't leave the neighborhood right away. In fact, she only made it as far as the end of the cul-de-sac before slamming the brakes again. From my driveway, I could see her silhouette through the windshield, one hand gripping the wheel, the other frantically wiping her nose as she sneezed yet again. Her car rocked slightly each time, her whole body jerked with another allergic explosion. I almost felt bad. Almost. Max sat beside me, head tilted, as if he too was wondering whether we had accidentally broken the HOA president. Diesel just plopped down and scratched behind his ear, blissfully unaware of the psychological and sinus warfare he'd just participated in. I watched Victoria finally pull herself together enough to drive off the back of her car, weaving slightly as she disappeared down the street. Part of me figured she'd go straight home, maybe take some overpriced antihistamines, and then plot whatever petty HOA retaliation she could dream up. It wouldn't have surprised me if a violation notice showed up in my mailbox the next morning accusing me of harboring dangerous animals or failing to maintain allergen-neutral air quality standards. But surprisingly, nothing came. No letters, no warnings, no passive-aggressive emails reminding the entire neighborhood about proper garage usage. Just silence. For the next 2 days, the street felt almost haunted without her daily patrols. No visor bobbing past my window, no clacking clipboard, no exaggerated sighs when someone's trash can dared to exist outdoors for 5 additional minutes. On the 3rd day, I was organizing tools on my pegboard when I heard footsteps outside the garage. Heavy ones. Hesitant. Definitely not the usual confident stomp of a woman with a laminated copy of the HOA bylaws in her purse. Then came a soft knock. I turned slowly and saw Victoria standing in the driveway like a kid about to confess to breaking a window. Her eyes were still a little puffy. She wore sunglasses, even though it was cloudy. Her posture was stiff, shoulders tense, and for once, she was completely visorless. If she'd had a clipboard, it would have looked like she was offering it as tribute. "Can I, speak to you?" she asked. It was the quietest I had ever heard her. I crossed my arms. "About what?" She swallowed hard enough that even Max perked up. "The garage incident." A beat passed. "Which one?" I asked casually. She winced. "The one where She hesitated, as if saying it out loud might summon Diesel back to sniff her again. "The one where I ended up in your garage with your dogs." I nodded slowly, waiting. Victoria inhaled deeply, clearly struggling to find the right words. Then she finally said it. "I'm sorry." It was barely audible, like a deflating balloon. She repeated it, this time louder. "I'm sorry for parking in your garage. I shouldn't have done that. If someone had told me the HOA president would stand on my driveway apologizing, I would have assumed they were having a fever dream. But there she was, the woman who'd fined the Petersons 3 times in 1 month for unapproved garden ornamentation, looking like she'd been spiritually crushed by a pair of Rottweilers and her own immune system. I didn't say anything immediately. I let the silence sit there until she shuffled uncomfortably. "I honestly didn't mean to fall asleep," she continued. "I was exhausted. I'd been dealing with complaints all day, and I thought I'd just sit for a moment. I wasn't thinking." "That much was clear," I replied. Her cheeks reddened. "And the dogs surprised me." "You screamed loud enough to wake the dead?" I said. "Diesel thought you were inviting him to play." She visibly shuddered. "I am very allergic." I noticed. Another awkward silence stretched. Finally, she said, "I want to make things right. I realize I've been overstepping, with a lot of people, and with you most of all." That was putting it mildly. She stiffened her shoulders, bracing herself. "If you want to file a complaint against me with the HOA board, I won't stop you. You'd have every right." I raised an eyebrow. "You are the HOA board." Her lips tightened. "Well, the rest of them would hear it." "Ah, yes." The other members, the treasurer, who was terrified of conflict, the secretary, who mostly showed up for snacks, and the vice president, who only volunteered to impress his girlfriend. A formidable judicial body indeed, I sighed. "Victoria, I don't want to file anything. I don't want drama." That seemed to shock her more than the dogs had. "You don't?" she asked. "No," I said. "I just want you to respect my property, and everyone else's." She nodded slowly. Then, for the first time since I'd known her, she dropped her posture, the rigid HOA stance, and genuinely looked like a person instead of a walking rule book. "I'll do better," she said softly. "I mean it." Diesel barked from inside the house, probably because he heard his name in my thoughts. Victoria jumped an inch off the ground. "I should go," she said quickly, "before the dogs come out." She practically power walked away, but not before giving the garage one last wary glance. When she turned the corner, I exhaled. A part of me wanted to believe she meant what she said. Another part suspected that once the embarrassment wore off, she'd return to patrolling the neighborhood like a self-appointed sheriff. But for now, at least, peace had returned. Or so I thought. He didn't argue, just turned and walked briskly toward his car, parked half a block away. Max huffed. Diesel growled softly, just enough to push him along quicker. When he drove off, tires squeaking slightly on the pavement, the street fell silent again. I stood there for a long moment, processing everything. Victoria wasn't the villain this time. She wasn't the problem. She was the target. And that meant something. I never thought I'd hear myself say. I needed to talk to her not as an annoyed homeowner, but as an ally. The next morning, I knocked on her door. She opened it, wearing pajamas and holding a mug that said, "Honoring our authority." I chose not to comment on that. "Victoria," I said, "we need to talk." She tensed. "Did something happen?" "Yes. And you're not gonna like it." She swallowed. "Is it about—" She pointed vaguely in the direction of my dogs. "No," I said. "It's about someone trying to make you look bad. And they're doing a disturbingly convincing job." Her face paled. "What do you mean?" "Someone hired a man to walk around at night pretending to be an HOA inspector." Victoria blinked. "Why would anyone do that?" "Because," I said carefully, "someone wants the neighborhood to think you're still abusing your authority." Her hand tightened around the mug. "But I'm not doing anything. I've been trying to fix things." "I know," I replied, "which means someone else is trying to undo that." She sank onto a chair near the entryway. "Who would do that?" "I don't know," I said, "but I can help you find out." Victoria looked up at me, truly looked, and for the first time, there was no judgment in her eyes. No superiority, no clipped tone, just fear and gratitude. "Why would you help me?" she whispered. I shrugged. "Because I don't like bullies, and right now, someone's trying to bully you." Her eyes welled not with allergic tears this time. "Thank you," she said softly. Diesel barked in the distance, as if to seal the pact. Max just sat stoically, as usual. And just like that, the woman who once made the whole neighborhood miserable had become someone worth standing beside. We just didn't know yet how far the sabotage went, or who was behind it, or how dangerous things were about to get. But we were going to find out. Together, Victoria sat very still, her fingers wrapped so tightly around her coffee mug that I half expected it to crack. For a long moment, she didn't say a word. She just stared past me, lips pressed together, eyes flickering with calculations, fear, and something I hadn't seen from her before: vulnerability. I waited. Pushing Victoria never worked. She pushed back twice as hard, but when she reached her limit, when she finally broke past the protective layer of authority she wore, like armor, she often slowed down just enough for the real person to surface. "This isn't supposed to happen," she whispered. "What isn't?" She looked up at me, the hot pink blazer suddenly looking less like confidence and more like costume. "HOA presidents don't get targeted. HOA presidents are the ones keeping order. If someone wanted to sabotage me..." Her voice trailed off. "Then maybe I've made more enemies than I thought." I didn't argue with that. Victoria had a talent for irritating people so consistently that half the neighborhood probably fantasized about her resigning. But fantasizing wasn't the same as hiring a fake inspector to intentionally undermine her. That required effort, planning, and motivation. And something told me this wasn't just a neighbor fed up with citations. "Tell me who you think would go this far." I said, "I don't know," she snapped, then seemed to catch herself. She drew in a shaky breath. "I mean, I've upset people, but this is calculated. Someone is documenting things. For what? To frame me? To get me removed? Or worse?" "Worse?" I said quietly. Her eyes widened. "Worse? How? How much worse can it get? You said neighbors felt unsafe. What if this guy wasn't hired to fake inspections, but to look into homes? Into cars? Into personal belongings?" Victoria swallowed. "But that would be illegal." "So is walking into someone's garage and sleeping in it," I pointed out. She flinched, cheeks flushing. Okay, fair. But why would anyone want information about the neighborhood?" "Blackmail. Burglary. Identity scams," I listed. Or maybe someone is trying to destabilize the HOA to justify taking control. Victoria frowned, the pink blazer shifting uncomfortably. Who would want control of this HOA? Do you know what we get paid? Nothing. Exactly. It's a volunteer job. You couldn't pay me to. She stopped herself. Well, you know. I almost smiled. If nothing else, her embarrassment humanized her. Let's focus on the facts, I said. Who benefits most from making you look incompetent? Victoria rubbed her temple, the glossy pink heels tapping nervously against the floor. Maybe one of the board members. They've been frustrated with me before. Because you micromanage everything. I don't. She stopped, sighed. Okay, maybe a little. She stood abruptly and paced, the pink heels clicking across the tile. The treasurer? No. She's terrified of conflict. The secretary? No. He only shows up for the pastries. The vice president. She paused. I raised an eyebrow. The boyfriend impressing one? Yes, she said slowly, the auburn wave swinging as she turned. But he's been trying to look more responsible lately. And he's ambitious. Very ambitious. Ambitious enough to hire someone to frame you? Possibly. He did bring up the idea of modernizing the HOA leadership structure. Whatever that means. It means he wants to be in charge. Victoria froze, the hot pink blazer suddenly hanging heavier, and for a moment, I saw it click in her mind. How this surveillance actor could provide ammunition for a coup, a scandal, a forced resignation, someone trying to dethrone the HOA queen. She sank into a chair. I can't believe this. I really can't. I pulled out a chair across from her and sat down. Believing it isn't the point. What we have to do is stop it. Victoria stared at me. We? Yeah, I said. We. Someone is messing with the neighborhood and using you to cover their tracks. We solve it together. Her eyes softened. Why would you help me after everything I've done? Because, I said, you're trying to change, and because someone worse might replace you. She let out a short, humorless laugh. That's terrifying. Before I could respond, there was a loud crash outside. A trash can tipping over. Diesel barked from my yard, sounding the alarm. Max growled a deep, resonant sound that made goosebumps rise on both our arms. Victoria and I shot to our feet simultaneously. That came from the side of the house, I said. Diesel barked again, more urgently this time. Victoria covered her mouth. You don't think the man came back, do you? Only one way to find out. We hurried outside, sticking close to the wall. Diesel sprinted ahead, tail stiff, barking toward the gate. Max stayed between Victoria and the noise, a naturally trained guard dog, positioning himself exactly where he needed to be. When I reached the gate and yanked it open, a figure jumped back in surprise. I almost punched him before I processed who it was. The vice president of the HOA, Brandon. Tall. Annoyingly handsome. Hair styled like he belonged in a shampoo commercial. Clipboard in hand. Whoa! Hey, calm down, he yelped, throwing his arms up as Max stepped forward, hackles raised. What the hell are you doing in my side yard? I demanded. I wasn't in your yard, he stammered. I was just passing by, taking notes. On what? I said sharply. He swallowed. On property maintenance. Victoria stepped forward, her voice cold. The pink blazer pulling taut across her shoulders. Property maintenance isn't done in people's yards at 11 at night. He looked startled to see her. Victoria? Oh, I didn't expect you here. Victoria folded her arms. Clearly. Brandon's eyes darted between us, his clipboard clutched tightly like a security blanket. I was just doing some preliminary checks for next month's meeting. Nothing suspicious. Victoria took a step closer, her face inches from his, the auburn waves framing her determination. Do you think I'm stupid, Brandon? He blinked. What? No. Of course not. You hired someone to impersonate an inspector, didn't you? His face drained of color. What? No, that's ridiculous. Is it? Victoria said, her voice low. Because I've been watching you. And you haven't just been taking notes, you've been snooping. Max growled again. Brandon backed up until he hit the fence. I didn't hire anyone, he blurted. I swear. Then why is someone walking around with a clipboard at night pretending to do HOA inspections? I pressed. He stuttered, opening and closing his mouth like a fish gasping for oxygen. I don't know anything about that, he said finally. Victoria narrowed her eyes. Then what are you doing on this side of the house? He hesitated, and in that hesitation, I saw everything. Fear, guilt, panic, not innocence. Brandon looked at Victoria, then at me, then at the dogs. Diesel stepped closer, barking once as if demanding an answer. Finally, Brandon blurted, Okay. Someone told me you were hiding something in your garage." Victoria blinked. "Me? No." Brandon pointed at me. "Him." I stared at him in disbelief. "Hiding what?" "I don't know," he said, voice cracking. "I got an anonymous message saying you had illegal equipment stored here, that you were a threat to the neighborhood, that the HOA should document your activities." Victoria and I exchanged a look. Someone was playing all sides. Someone who wasn't Brandon. Someone who wasn't Victoria. Someone who wanted chaos. Victoria spoke first. "Show me the message." Brandon fumbled with his phone, hand shaking, and finally pulled up an email from a burner address. No name, no signature, just vague accusations and instructions. Victoria's face went white, the hot pink blazer sagging slightly. "That email. I got one too." "So did I said slowly. A chill ran through all of us simultaneously. This wasn't petty revenge. This wasn't a power struggle. This wasn't an HOA feud. This was coordinated. Someone was manipulating us, watching us, playing us like chess pieces. Diesel whined softly. Max growled again, staring toward the street. Victoria whispered, "What if the guy last night wasn't the only one?" I tightened my fists. "Then we're not dealing with an HOA problem anymore." Brandon swallowed. "Then what is it?" I looked from him to Victoria to the darkened street beyond us. "It's someone who wants this neighborhood torn apart," I said. "And unless we figure out who, they're going to succeed." Victoria's voice trembled, the glossy pink heels shifting nervously. "What do we do?" And for the first time, I realized they were both looking to me for leadership. Not Victoria, the HOA president. Not Brandon, the ambitious ladder climber. Me, the guy who just wanted to be left alone. I took a deep breath. "We find out who's behind this," I said. "We stop them, and we protect this neighborhood. Together." Victoria nodded slowly. Brandon nodded faster, mostly because Max stepped closer. Diesel barked once, as if sealing the agreement. None of us knew how deep the sabotage went. None of us knew who we were up against. But one thing was clear. This was no longer about garages, dogs, or petty HOA drama. Someone was hunting us, and we were done being prey. Everything felt heavier after that night. Not just the air or the silence. The entire neighborhood felt different, as if the foundations beneath our quiet little street had shifted. People still watered their lawns. Kids still biked around the cul-de-sac. Porch lights still flickered on at dusk. But beneath all of it ran a current of unease, a sense that someone was watching, evaluating, waiting. Brandon, for all his earlier bravado, stayed glued to Victoria's side like a panicked intern trying not to get fired. Victoria, for the first time in her HOA career, stopped thinking about rules and started thinking about safety. And I found myself in the strange position of being the one level-headed adult in the room. A week passed. Every night, I walked the dogs a little slower, listening for footsteps that didn't belong, watching the shadows, checking corners. Max was a sentinel silent, alert. Diesel was the enthusiastic patrolman, sniffing everything twice just to be sure. Nothing happened. Until it did. It started with an email. Not from the HOA, not from a neighbor, not even from a burner account. This one came from a name I recognized, a name that shouldn't have been involved in any of this. When I opened my inbox early Saturday morning, half asleep and sipping coffee, I saw it. From Douglas Harper. Subject: We need to talk. Douglas, the former HOA president, the man Victoria replaced, the man who resigned due to stress, the man I hadn't seen in over a year since he moved out of the neighborhood. Why was he emailing me? The message was short. You're in danger. They're coming for you next. Meet me at 6 p.m. behind the old maintenance shed. Come alone. There it was. The kind of message you see in movies right before everything explodes. I stared at my laptop for a long, silent minute. Max sensed something and rested his head on my knee. Diesel brought me one of his chew toys, completely unaware that his timing was both adorable and painfully unhelpful. Victoria arrived at my door 30 minutes later, hair frazzled, holding a stack of HOA paperwork she probably grabbed just to look official. The hot pink blazer replaced by a simple cardigan. I got another email last night, she said without greeting. Did you? I hesitated. Yes, from a name this time. Douglas? She said immediately. The fact that she guessed it instantly told me everything. Someone wasn't attacking Victoria. Someone wasn't targeting the HOA. Someone was targeting the position. I think he knows something, I said. Victoria nodded. And you're going to meet him. Aren't you? I don't see any other choice. Brandon appeared behind her like he'd been eavesdropping the whole time. He held a clipboard. Of course he did, but he looked nervous rather than confident. You can't go alone, he blurted. I have to go alone, I said. He was specific. Victoria stepped forward. Then we'll follow at a distance. That defeats the purpose of alone, I said. It's not optional, she snapped. It was almost comforting seeing a spark of old Victoria return. Almost. I shook my head. Look, if this is a trap, I can't drag you into it. If it's not, he'll only talk if it's just me. Victoria looked at Max and Diesel. Then take them. Max lifted his head with stoic approval. Diesel wagged like he'd been chosen for a game show. I exhaled. Fine. They come with me. But you two stay out of sight. Victoria didn't argue further. The shed Douglas mentioned sat behind the old community garden, an area now neglected, overgrown with weeds, and partially fenced off due to budget constraints. The perfect spot for a meetup you didn't want anyone to see. Time crawled towards 6 p.m. I kept replaying the email in my head. Why warn me? Why now? Why not call or text or speak to Victoria? When the time came, I clipped the leashes onto Max and Diesel and headed down the path behind the houses. The sky was dimming, the air cooling, shadows stretching longer across the pavement. The shed loomed ahead, rusted metal, peeling paint, windows fogged with dust. Max stopped first. He growled low in his chest. Easy, I whispered. Diesel stiffened as well, his tail frozen mid-wag. Someone was inside. I approached slowly. Douglas? The door creaked open, and there he was, older than I remembered, beard longer, eyes tired. He looked like a man who had been running from something for a long time. You came, he said quietly. What's going on? I asked. He glanced nervously behind me. Are you alone? Just me and the dogs. He stared at Max and Diesel. Good, they'll keep you alive. It wasn't a joke. Douglas stepped out fully, shutting the shed door behind him. He looked thinner, paler, the way someone looks when they've carried fear like a backpack for too long. I didn't resign because of stress, he said. I resigned because of them. Who's them? He swallowed. A group. People who want control of HOA boards. They infiltrate neighborhoods. They destabilize the leadership. They install someone they control. And then they exploit the community funds for profit. My stomach tightened. You're telling me there's a criminal ring targeting HOA boards? Yes, he whispered. Organized, strategic, and they're expanding. This neighborhood was small, but it was a test site. I tried to push back. They threatened me. Then they framed me. Then they forced me out. My pulse started pounding. Why contact me? Because they moved on to Victoria, he said. And she's too blind to see it, and now you're involved. You weren't supposed to interfere. The moment you confronted their fake inspector, you became a threat. Diesel whined. Max pressed closer to my leg. Douglas lowered his voice further. Tonight isn't a warning, it's a last chance. They know you're meeting me. They know she's watching you. They know you're all working together now. How? I demanded. How could they know? Because one of your neighbors is working for them. I froze. Douglas took another step closer. If you want to survive this, if you want the neighborhood to survive, you need to figure out who the insider is before they escalate. Before I could respond, Max barked sharply. A twig snapped behind us. Douglas's eyes widened. They found us. A figure darted between the trees. Then another, shadows rushing in fast. Run! Douglas shouted. Max lunged forward, barking fiercely. Diesel followed, teeth bared. I grabbed Douglas's arm. This way. We sprinted through the brush as two shapes chased behind us. Victoria and Brandon appeared near the path, eyes wide as they saw the chaos. What's happening? Victoria screamed, the simple cardigan flapping. Move! I yelled. Everything blurred, the dogs ahead, Douglas behind, Victoria stumbling beside us. Branches whipped my face. Gravel slid under my shoes. The pursuers were close. Too close. Max suddenly spun, snarling, blocking their path just long enough for us to reach the open street. Lights flicked on in nearby homes as neighbors stepped outside, alarmed by the commotion. The figures froze at the edge of the darkness, faces hidden, clothes dark, movements controlled. Not amateurs. Then they backed away, retreating silent, deliberate. Victoria clutched her chest. Who were they? Douglas shook his head. Professionals. They won't stop. I wiped sweat from my forehead. My heart felt like it was drilling through my ribs. So what do we do now? I asked. Douglas looked at me with grim resolve. Now we fight back, and we take back this neighborhood. Victoria swallowed hard. All of us? Douglas nodded. All of us. Because they're coming. And they're not just after me anymore. Max growled softly at the shadows. Diesel pressed against my leg, and just like that, the war for our quiet little cul-de-sac had officially begun. The truth is, HOA drama is usually petty, annoying, frustrating, sometimes unfair, but every so often, something deeper hides underneath. Something that forces you to stand up, not just for yourself, but for everyone around you. What happened in our neighborhood started with a parked car and a pair of Rottweilers, but it grew into a reminder that community only works when people protect each other, when you pay attention, when you set boundaries, when you refuse to let fear or power control your life. Victoria learned humility, Brandon learned accountability, and I learned that even one person standing firm can make a difference. The criminal ring, we reported everything to the authorities, turned over Douglas's evidence, identified the patterns. It took months, but the operation was dismantled. The neighborhood? Safer now. Quieter. Real quiet, not the forced kind. Victoria stepped down as president, eventually. Not because she was forced out, but because she chose to. She still lives here. Still waves when I walk the dogs, but she never parks in my garage. And Max and Diesel? They're still the best security system money can't buy. Because some lessons stick, and some boundaries once established never get crossed again.